Taehyung disappeared without warning. No announcement, no farewell, no schedule update. He simply vanished from South Korea, and within hours, the silence around his absence became louder than any headline. His passport was missing. His phone was turned off. And inside the BTS dorm kitchen, the air felt wrong in a way none of them could explain. Namjoon's voice was low, almost careful, as if speaking too loudly might shatter something already fragile. He stood near the counter, fingers resting against the edge, eyes unfocused. Jungkook froze in front of the refrigerator, one hand still gripping the handle, his body caught between motion and disbelief. Jimin sat on the couch with a bowl of cereal gone untouched, the spoon trembling slightly in his hand. No one spoke. The ticking clock on the wall sounded aggressive, each second pressing in on them. Taehyung was gone. No message, no call, not even a note. The last time anyone had seen him was 2 nights earlier. He had stayed late in the practice room, hoodie pulled low, hair damp with sweat, smiling softly as if nothing was wrong. He laughed when Jungkook joked, nodded along to feedback, moved through choreography with precision. He looked tired, yes, quieter than usual, but Taehyung had always carried his exhaustion gracefully. No one thought this was coming. Jungkook finally stepped back from the fridge, his chest tight. Taehyung wouldn't just leave, not like this, not without saying something, not to him. Hoseok stood near the table, scrolling through Taehyung's Instagram with growing tension in his jaw. The last post was 4 days old, a photo of the sky over the Han River. No caption, no filter, just empty blue stretching endlessly. It felt like a goodbye no one knew how to read at the time. "Check with the manager again," Jimin said, breaking the silence. His voice wavered. Maybe he asked for time off. Maybe he needed space. "I already did," Namjoon replied quietly. "HYBE doesn't know where he is. His entire schedule was cancelled without approval. No one signed off on it." Jungkook was already texting, fingers shaking as he scrolled through their message thread. The last thing Taehyung had sent him was a photo of a stray dog they'd seen during a trip abroad. No words. Jungkook had replied with a joke. After that, nothing. Every message now sat unread, unanswered. Yoongi's voice came from the hallway, rougher than usual. What if he doesn't want to be found? The question landed too hard. Because what if it was true? What if Taehyung, the one who always stayed late, who listened more than he spoke, who held the group together in quiet ways no one noticed, had chosen to disappear? 3 hours later, the security footage arrived, and it only made things worse. The screen showed Taehyung leaving the dorm at 2:07 a.m. dressed in black from head to toe, hoodie up, mask on, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't look back, not once. Another clip showed him entering Incheon International Airport alone, a one-way ticket, first class. "Where?" Jimin asked softly. The manager hesitated on the phone before answering. "Buenos Aires, Argentina." The room went silent. "Argentina," Jin repeated, disbelief lacing his voice. "What's in Argentina?" No one had an answer. Not even Google felt sufficient. 36 hours later, the media caught on. Headlines spread fast. Taehyung missing. HYBE responds to speculation. Fans fear the worst as schedules are cancelled. Hashtags exploded within minutes. "Where is Taehyung? Taehyung, come back. We trust you, Taehyung." But Taehyung remained silent. Then the photo surfaced. It was blurry, clearly taken from a distance. A fan account posted it from Mendoza, a quiet province in western Argentina. There he was, standing alone at the edge of a vineyard, golden sunlight washing over rows of green behind him. Cream hoodie, loose jeans, sunglasses hiding his eyes, a cup of coffee in his hand. It was undeniably Taehyung. He looked thinner, tired, but there was something else, something unsettling. He looked free. Back in Seoul, the members gathered around the studio table, eyes fixed on the screen. Jungkook stared longer than anyone else. His chest felt like it was collapsing inward. He zoomed in, desperate to read Taehyung's expression, to understand why. Why here? Why alone? Why without a word? Namjoon finally spoke. We're booking the next flight. Jungkook didn't respond. He was already packing, because whatever Taehyung was running from, they were about to face it. In Mendoza, the sun was unforgiving. Taehyung stood at the edge of a narrow dirt path winding through the vineyard, the Andes Mountains looming in the distance like silent witnesses. The dry wind tugged at his hoodie and his thoughts. He had been there for 3 days, maybe 4. He had stopped counting. Here his name carried no weight, no whispers, no expectations, no cameras waiting for him to smile. He sipped bitter Malbec from a chipped mug and exhaled slowly. No stages, no scripts, no version of himself crafted for the world. For the first time in years, he was Kim Taehyung of BTS. He was just Taehyung. His phone lay powered off in the bottom drawer of the small guest house behind him. His bags were half unpacked, a single pair of shoes by the door, a notebook on the bed, its pages still blank. But the silence wouldn't last. A car engine echoed down the dirt road. Taehyung closed his eyes, fingers tightening around the mug. They had found him. The car stopped at the edge of the vineyard, gravel crunching beneath the tires like a warning. Taehyung didn't turn around. He already knew who it was. He could feel it in the way his chest tightened, in the familiar weight pressing behind his ribs. Footsteps approached, slow and controlled, as if whoever stepped out didn't want to scare him away. Taehyung. Namjoon's voice carried first, steady but thin around the edges. Taehyung opened his eyes and stared at the mountains instead. He didn't answer. Jungkook followed a few steps behind, fists clenched inside the sleeves of his hoodie. He had imagined this moment 100 times on the flight over. None of those versions prepared him for how small Taehyung looked standing there alone. Not weak, just unguarded, like someone who had finally set something heavy down and didn't know whether he was allowed to pick it back up. You couldn't send a text, Jungkook said, his voice cracked despite himself. Not even one word. Taehyung turned slowly. The sunglasses came off. His eyes were tired, red at the edges, but calm in a way Jungkook had never seen before. If I had, Taehyung said quietly, I wouldn't be here. That answer hit harder than shouting ever could. Jimin stepped forward, anger and worry tangling in his expression. Do you have any idea what you did to us? We thought, he stopped himself, jaw tightening. We thought something terrible happened. Taehyung didn't flinch. Something terrible was happening, he replied, just not the kind you can see. They followed him inside the guest house, a modest place that smelled faintly of wood and citrus. Taehyung poured water for everyone with practiced calm. No one drank. The air felt too tight, too full of everything unsaid. Jungkook finally broke. Why didn't you tell me? Taehyung looked at him then, really looked. His composure wavered just enough to reveal the fracture beneath. Because you would have made me stay. And that's bad, Jungkook shot back. Yes, Taehyung said softly. Because I was already disappearing and staying would have finished the job. Silence fell heavy between them. Namjoon rubbed his temples. HYBE is panicking, the media's circling, fans are scared. I know, Taehyung said. I see it when I turn my phone on. That's why I turn it off again. Hoseok leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. You don't get to step out of the storm and leave the rest of us standing in it. Taehyung swallowed. I didn't want you in it at all. That night no one slept much. The vineyard stretched endlessly under the stars, quiet in a way Seoul never was. Taehyung sat outside alone, knees pulled to his chest, breathing in the cold air. Inside, whispers traveled from room to room. Worry, frustration, fear. Jungkook lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment he might have missed a sign. Every time Taehyung laughed a little too late. Every time he said he was fine. Morning arrived pale and unforgiving. The house creaked softly as people moved around, pretending not to be exhausted. Taehyung sat at the kitchen table with untouched tea, hands wrapped around the mug. Jungkook stood across from him. So what now? Taehyung hesitated. Then, I'm not going back, not yet. The words dropped like glass. You're serious, Jungkook said. I have to be. Jimin shook his head. You're walking away from everything. No, Taehyung replied. I'm walking towards something. I just don't know what it is yet. And us? Jungkook asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Taehyung's eyes softened, then broke. You're the reason this hurts. They argued, quietly at first, then with more edge. Responsibility, love, obligation. Every word carved something deeper between them, until Jungkook finally said what he had been holding back for years. I thought you loved me. The room went still. Taehyung closed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice trembled. I do, but loving you was becoming the only way I knew how to survive, and that's not fair to either of us. Jungkook laughed bitterly. I didn't ask you to save me. I know, Taehyung said. That's the problem. The truth lingered, raw and irreversible. Later that day, the world caught up with them. Rumors exploded online. Secret scandals, fights, betrayal. Jungkook's name was dragged into places it didn't belong. Taehyung watched the headlines scroll across his phone, guilt settling heavy in his chest. They're blaming you, Hoseok said quietly. Taehyung's hands shook. Then I need to speak. That night he sat alone in the dim room, camera light reflecting in his eyes. He pressed record. For the first time since leaving Korea, Kim Taehyung began to tell the truth. And everything changed. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the camera. Taehyung sat cross-legged on the floor, back against the bed, a single lamp casting soft shadows across his face. No makeup, no stylists, no script taped behind the lens. Just him, breathing slowly, trying to keep his hands from shaking. He stared at the screen for a long moment before speaking, as if the weight of millions of eyes was already pressing against his chest. Hi, he said quietly, it's Taehyung. Within seconds of going live, the numbers climbed faster than he could register. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions. I didn't leave Korea because I was angry, he continued. I didn't leave because of a scandal, and I didn't leave because I wanted to hurt anyone. He paused, swallowing hard. I left because I was losing myself. Back in Seoul, Jungkook watched the video alone, sitting on the edge of his couch, phone clenched in his hand. He hadn't slept, had barely eaten. He told himself he wouldn't watch. He told himself it would hurt too much. But the moment Taehyung's face appeared on screen, he couldn't look away. For a long time, Taehyung said, I felt like I was living on autopilot, smiling when I was supposed to smile, being strong when I was expected to be strong, giving pieces of myself to everyone until I couldn't tell what was left for me. His voice didn't break. That was somehow worse. I started waking up anxious, panicking for no clear reason. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize who I was becoming, and every time I tried to say something, I told myself to just endure a little longer. The comments were flooding in now, hearts, tears, messages begging him to come home. I'm not blaming anyone, he said quickly, as if he could hear the accusations forming already. Not my members, not the company, not the fans. This isn't about blame, it's about truth. In the Vineyard guest house, Namjoon stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching the same video on his tablet. Hoseok sat on the floor, elbows on his knees, eyes glossy. Jimin hadn't said a word since Taehyung hit record. The truth is, Taehyung continued, I needed to step away before I broke completely. He exhaled shakily, then looked directly into the camera. I've seen the rumors. I've seen the stories people are making up, and I can't stay silent when that silence is hurting someone I care about. Jungkook's breath caught. I didn't leave because of Jungkook, Taehyung said. I left despite him. The words hit like a shockwave. If I had stayed, Taehyung went on, I would have held onto him like a lifeline, and I would have dragged us both under. That's not love, that's fear. Jungkook's eyes burned. He replayed that line once, twice, 10 times. I love him, Taehyung said simply. I always have, but loving someone doesn't mean making them responsible for keeping you alive. He wiped at his face, finally letting emotion crack through. To my members, he said, voice softening, I'm sorry for disappearing, for the pain I caused. I thought I was protecting you. I realize now I was also protecting myself from facing how much I hurt you. The video ended without a dramatic goodbye, just Taehyung reaching forward and turning the camera off. The world exploded. Within minutes, his name trended worldwide. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. Clips spread across TikTok, slowed down, set to sad music. Fans cried. Fans argued. Fans defended him with a fierceness that bordered on desperation. At HYBE headquarters, phones rang non-stop. Emergency meetings were called. Statements were drafted, revised, discarded. No amount of damage control could contain what Taehyung had just done. Because this wasn't a scandal. It was a confession. Inside the dorm, the remaining members gathered in silence, Taehyung's video looping on the TV. No one spoke for a long time. He finally said it, Hoseok murmured. Jimin nodded faintly, but he didn't say what happens next. Namjoon leaned back, eyes heavy. I don't think even he knows. Jungkook watched from his apartment, heart pounding. When the video ended for the 10th time, he stood up suddenly, grabbing his jacket and keys. Across the world, in a quiet vineyard under a foreign sky, Taehyung sat alone on the bed, phone buzzing endlessly beside him. Missed calls, messages, headlines. One name sat at the top of the screen. Jungkook. No message, just the weight of everything they hadn't said. Taehyung closed his eyes, pressing the phone to his chest. For the first time since leaving Korea, he wasn't running anymore. But he still didn't know if he was ready to be found. Jungkook landed in Argentina under a sky heavy with clouds. The airport felt too quiet for what was churning inside him. He moved through customs without really seeing anything, mind replaying Taehyung's voice over and over. I love him. I always have. The words echoed not as comfort, but as something unfinished. The drive to Mendoza blurred past the window. Dry earth, endless roads, mountains rising like questions with no answers. Jungkook barely spoke. The driver didn't ask. When the vineyard finally came into view, Jungkook's chest tightened. It looked peaceful, too peaceful, like a place meant for healing, not confrontation. Taehyung was outside when Jungkook arrived, sitting on the low stone wall near the path, hoodie pulled up, notebook resting untouched beside him. He looked up at the sound of footsteps and froze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. You came, Taehyung said quietly. Jungkook nodded once, his throat felt locked. You knew I would. Taehyung looked away, a faint, sad smile tugging at his lips. That's why I was afraid to turn my phone back on. Jungkook stepped closer, stopping a few feet away, close enough to see the dark circles under Taehyung's eyes, close enough to remember every late night, every shared silence. Why didn't you tell me you were hurting like that? He asked. Why did I have to find out with the rest of the world? Taehyung's fingers curled into the fabric of his sleeves. Because when you look at me like that, he said, voice low, I forget how to choose myself. The words stung more than anger would have. Inside the guest house, the air felt thick. They sat across from each other at the small table, the space between them crowded with years of unspoken things. Jungkook leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You said you love me, he said. Was that real or was that just something you needed to say? Taehyung met his gaze, unflinching. It was real, he said. That's why it scared me. Jungkook let out a shaky laugh. You don't get to say that and then disappear. I know, Taehyung replied. That's the part I'll regret forever. They talked until the light shifted and the room grew dim, about pressure, about expectations, about how love can become a mirror that shows you parts of yourself you're not ready to face. Taehyung spoke of feeling hollow on stage, of smiling while something inside him quietly eroded. Jungkook listened, jaw tight, eyes glassy. "You think I didn't feel it," Jungkook said finally. "You pulling away, you pretending you were fine. I thought I did something wrong." Taehyung shook his head. "You were the only thing that felt right," he said, "and I didn't know how to survive that without losing myself." Night fell fully then, the vineyard swallowed by shadow. Outside, the wind moved through the vines like a whisper. Inside, Jungkook stood, packing once before stopping in front of Taehyung. "So what are you saying?" he asked. "That you love me but you can't be with me?" Taehyung's breath hitched. "I'm saying I don't know how to love you without making you my anchor," he said, "and that's not fair." Jungkook looked at him for a long time. Then his shoulders dropped, exhaustion settling in. "I didn't need to save you," he said quietly. "I just needed you to let me stand next to you." Taehyung's eyes filled, but he didn't reach out. Outside, phones buzzed across the world. Fans dissected every frame of Taehyung's video. Articles debated his future. Was this a hiatus, a goodbye, a breakdown? No one had answers. HYBE released a careful statement asking for patience and understanding. It satisfied no one. Back in Korea, the members watched the situation unfold with helpless frustration. Namjoon paced. Jimin checked his phone obsessively. Hoseok stared out the window, jaw tight. They knew something fundamental was shifting and they didn't know how to stop it. In Argentina, Jungkook slept on the couch that night. Taehyung lay awake in the bedroom, staring at the ceiling, every word from earlier looping in his mind. Love, fear, choice. Morning came with pale light and distant birdsong. Jungkook was already awake when Taehyung stepped into the kitchen. They stood there in silence, the ordinary act of making coffee feeling unbearably intimate. "I'm not asking you to stay," Jungkook said suddenly, "and I'm not asking you to come back tomorrow." Taehyung looked at him. "I'm asking you not to disappear again," Jungkook continued. "If you need time, take it. If you need space, take it. But don't cut me out like I don't matter." Taehyung swallowed hard. "You matter more than you know." "Then prove it," Jungkook said softly. They stood there, the distance between them no longer physical but fragile. Outside, the sun climbed higher over the vineyard, casting long shadows across the ground. Nothing was resolved, nothing was fixed. But for the first time since leaving Korea, Taehyung didn't feel completely alone. And for Jungkook, that was enough to stay, at least for now. The days in Mendoza began to blur together, measured not by schedules or alarms, but by light. Morning sun spilled gently over the vineyard, warming the stone paths. Evenings arrived slowly, the sky fading into deep amber and violet. For Taehyung, time no longer rushed him forward. It waited. Jungkook stayed. At first it felt temporary, a pause, a fragile truce between two people standing on opposite sides of something they didn't yet know how to cross. They spoke less, but when they did, the words mattered more. There were no arguments now, only quiet honesty, long walks between the vines, shared meals eaten slowly, silence that no longer felt like punishment. One afternoon, Taehyung finally opened the notebook he had left untouched. He didn't write lyrics, he didn't write plans, he wrote questions. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I want when I'm not needed? Why does rest feel like guilt? Jungkook watched him from across the table, pretending not to. "You're thinking too hard," he said gently. Taehyung smiled faintly. "I've never known how not to." News from Korea continued to ripple outward. HYBE confirmed Taehyung would be on an extended hiatus. The word echoed everywhere. Hiatus. Fans debated what it meant. Some panicked. Some defended him fiercely. Some simply waited, trusting that he would return when he was ready. Inside the dorm, the remaining members adjusted to a new rhythm. Practice felt quieter. Namjoon carried more weight than he let on. Jimin checked in with Taehyung every few days, never pushing, never demanding answers. Hoseok sent voice notes filled with warmth and forced cheer. Yoongi sent short messages that said more in a few words than anyone else could in paragraphs. Jungkook felt torn between worlds. He belonged in Korea, but something inside him refused to leave Taehyung alone again. At night, when sleep wouldn't come, he lay awake on the couch listening to the sounds of the house, wondering if staying was selfish or necessary. One evening, the tension finally surfaced. "You're not supposed to put your life on hold for me," Taehyung said quietly as they sat outside under the dim string lights. "You have a career, a future, a place you belong." Jungkook didn't look at him. "I decide where I belong," he replied. "Not the company, not the fans, not even you." Taehyung turned to him, eyes searching. "And what if I can't give you what you want right now?" Jungkook exhaled slowly. "Then don't," he said. "Just don't shut me out." The words settled between them, heavy but grounding. Days later, a call came from Namjoon. He didn't pressure, he didn't persuade, he simply spoke honestly. "We're not broken," he said, "but we're changing. And when you're ready, there will be space for you, however you come back." Taehyung listened, tears slipping silently down his face. That night he stood alone at the edge of the vineyard, the Andes silhouetted against the dark sky. He thought about the boy he used to be, the dreams that once felt simple, the love that had grown complicated. He thought about Jungkook, sleeping inside, trusting him not to disappear again. For the first time, Taehyung understood something clearly. He hadn't left Korea to escape BTS. He hadn't left to abandon love. He had left to learn how to stay without losing himself. In the early hours of the morning, Taehyung turned his phone on and opened a new note. This time, he didn't hesitate. "I'm still healing," he wrote, "but I'm not gone." He didn't post it, not yet. Some truths needed time before they were shared. When the sun rose, Jungkook found him in the kitchen, calm in a way he hadn't been before. "I think," Taehyung said carefully, "that when I go back, I need to go back differently." Jungkook nodded. "Then go back when you're ready," he said. "I'll be there." They didn't promise anything else. Across the world, fans continued to wait. Speculation softened into patience. The noise faded just enough for something real to form beneath it, a quieter story, a human one. Taehyung looked out over the vineyard one last time, breathing in the air that had held him together when everything else threatened to pull him apart. He didn't know exactly who he would be when he returned to Korea. But he knew this. He would return as himself. Not as an image. Not as an expectation. The announcement came quietly, almost deliberately understated, as if mirroring Taehyung himself. No dramatic teaser. No countdown. Just a short notice released early in the morning Korean time, confirming that Taehyung would return to Seoul within the month to begin a gradual reintegration into schedules, carefully adjusted to prioritize his well-being. The internet erupted anyway. Fans woke up to notifications that felt unreal. Some cried in relief. Others worried it was too soon. Headlines framed it as a comeback, a recovery, a test. Analysts dissected every word of the statement, searching for hidden meaning. But the truth was simpler than anyone expected. Taehyung was ready to go home. The night before his departure, the vineyard was unusually quiet. Jungkook stood with him outside, the air cool, the sky heavy with stars. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Everything that mattered had already been said in the days before. "You don't have to walk me to the gate," Taehyung said softly. Jungkook smiled, the kind that held both warmth and restraint. "I know." They hugged, not tightly, not desperately, just enough to feel real, just enough to remember. "Don't disappear," Jungkook said. "I won't," Taehyung replied. And this time it wasn't a promise made out of fear, it was a choice. The flight back to Korea was long and sleepless. Taehyung stared out the window as clouds shifted beneath him, thinking about how different this return felt. No running, no hiding, just a quiet acceptance of who he was and who he was still becoming. When he landed at Incheon, there were no cameras waiting, no reporters shouting questions. The company had arranged a private arrival, but somewhere beyond the airport walls, millions of people were holding their breath. Inside the familiar van, the city lights felt almost overwhelming. Seoul hadn't changed, he had. At the dorm, the door opened before he could knock. Jimin was the first to pull him into a hug. Hoseok followed immediately, laughing through his emotion. Yoongi nodded once, eyes soft. Namjoon stepped forward last, placing a hand on Taehyung's shoulder. "You look lighter," Namjoon said. "I feel lighter," Taehyung answered. They didn't rehearse that night. They didn't talk about schedules or plans. They ordered food, sat on the floor, and let the normalcy sink in. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the same as before. But it was honest. Days later, Taehyung appeared publicly for the first time since his departure. Not on a stage, not on live television. Just a handwritten message posted quietly, in his own words. He didn't explain everything. He didn't apologize for taking time. He thanked those who waited, those who worried, and those who trusted him enough to let him be human. The response was overwhelming. Support outweighed doubt. Understanding softened fear. The narrative shifted, slowly but noticeably, from speculation to respect. Behind the scenes, rehearsals resumed carefully. Short sessions, long breaks, conversations that mattered more than choreography. Taehyung found himself smiling more easily, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. One evening, long after practice ended, Jungkook called. "How does it feel?" he asked. Taehyung thought for a moment. "Like I came back without leaving myself behind." There was a pause on the line, then Jungkook laughed softly. "That's all I ever wanted for you." They didn't talk about the future, not in detail, not yet. Some things were still unfolding, still fragile, but the distance between them no longer felt like loss. It felt like space, healthy, breathable space. As weeks passed, the world adjusted to a new version of Taehyung, one who spoke more slowly, one who set boundaries, one who understood that strength didn't mean silence. And for the fans watching, something shifted too. The story they thought they knew transformed into something deeper, less sensational, more real. Taehyung hadn't shocked the world by leaving Korea. He had changed it by coming back differently. Not healed completely. Not finished growing. But present. And this time, that was enough. The first stage Taehyung stood on, after his return, was smaller than anything he had known in years. No explosive intro, no massive LED screens, just soft lighting, a seated band, and an audience close enough for him to see individual faces. The kind of room where there was nowhere to hide. As he stepped into the light, a hush fell over the crowd. Not the screaming frenzy people expected, but something gentler, respectful, almost protective. Taehyung took the microphone and didn't speak right away. He let the silence breathe. "Thank you for waiting," he said at last. That was all. The performance wasn't perfect. His voice wavered once. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the mic stand. But for the first time in a long time, none of that mattered, because he wasn't performing survival anymore. He was sharing presence. Across the internet, clips spread rapidly. Fans noticed everything. How his smile reached his eyes, how he paused between songs, how he seemed grounded in his own body, not floating above it. Comment sections changed tone, less speculation, more gratitude. Backstage, Namjoon watched quietly, arms folded, a small smile forming. "He's not trying to prove anything," he said to Yoongi. "That's why it works," Yoongi replied. Schedules remained limited by design. Taehyung declined several offers that would have been automatic yeses before. Variety shows, brand events, overseas travel. Each decision felt strange at first, like breaking an unspoken rule, but no one stopped him. Because something had shifted. The company listened more carefully now. The members checked in without hovering. Fans learned slowly that loving someone also meant letting them rest. One night after practice, Taehyung sat alone in the studio, lights dimmed, guitar resting against his knee. He wasn't writing for charts. He wasn't thinking about performance. He was just letting sound exist. His phone buzzed. Jungkook. Saw the clip, the message read, "You look like yourself." Taehyung smiled, fingers brushing the strings softly. "I felt like myself," he typed back. There was a pause before the reply came. "I'm proud of you." The words settled warmly in his chest, not as validation, but as recognition. Their relationship didn't return to what it once was, and that was okay. They spoke honestly now, about boundaries, about timing, about how love didn't need to be constant to be real. Some days they talked for hours, other days they didn't talk at all. And neither felt like abandonment anymore. At a fan event weeks later, a handwritten question was passed up to the stage. "Were you scared to come back?" Taehyung read it carefully, then nodded. "Yes," he said. "I was scared I'd be expected to be the same person I was before." The audience listened closely. "But I learned something while I was away," he continued. "You don't heal to return to who you were. You heal to become who you are." The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was deep. That night Taehyung walked home alone through familiar streets, hands in his coat pockets, city lights reflecting off the pavement. Seoul felt different now, not smaller, just human again. He stopped briefly, looking up at the sky between buildings. For the first time, he didn't feel like the world was waiting for him to explain himself. He had already done that by living honestly. And somewhere far away, Jungkook looked at his phone, watching another clip replay, not with worry this time but with quiet peace. The story the world thought it wanted had been drama, mystery, shock. What it received instead was growth. And that, in the end, was far more powerful.